Welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast with your host, Johnny Gorky. You have the power to overcome challenges and fears. Let my voice and the voice of many others show you how to transform these challenges into opportunities. To learn more about future podcasts and read episode show notes, check out my website at www.thepowerofyourvoice.com.
Welcome back to the Power of Your Voice podcast. I'm so glad you're here with me today, my friend. This is episode 31. I have done many very touching interviews, and they have all left an incredible impact on me personally. The interview you're about to listen to right now with my friend Jerris Madison will make you laugh and maybe even cry. And my hope is that it will empower you to live every single day of your life like it could be your last, and to stay positive. Whether you're someone struggling with challenges in life, wanting to start your own business, or wanting to hear business tips and strategies from a fashion expert who is both in front of cameras and behind it, this is one positive interview that you will want to share with others. Jerris Madison is a Los Angeles-based noted fashion photographer who is also the publisher and editor-in-chief at Obvious Magazine. Obvious Magazine is one of the most influential magazines with a global reach of 4 million each month through social media and obviousmag.com. Among his clients is Kevin Hart, Essence Magazine, Grammy Nominated Jazz Instrumentalist Tia Fuller, and Eva Marcille Sterling's. Jerris' most recent work was featured on Dianne Reeves' 2015 Grammy win for Best Jazz Vocals Album. A Detroit native, Jerris finds his stability through family and friends. Noted for always living his best life, this perspective was put to the test in November of 2014 when Jerris lost his right leg to Chondrosarcoma Bone Cancer. Not one to be slowed down, Jerris views himself as a survivor and continues to play various roles such as an image consultant, social media expert, film, TV, wardrobe stylist, motivational speaker, and as a photographer. He hopes that his story and experience will lead him to become an author, a global philanthropist, potential talk show host, and even documentaries that focuses on his life and the stories of other amputees around the world. So hey Jerris, welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast, man. It is so great to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're so welcome. So I'm going to go into the juicy stuff. On August 21st, 2014, your life has forever changed. What happened, and how has life prepared you for what happened to you?
Oh, wow. August was when, in 2014, I was dealing with, I had a tumor in my right femur. You know, I was going to doctors for over 2 years, all the way from 2012 to 2014. I was just going to the same particular hospital, and they were like, oh, you don't have cancer, you'll be okay. January of that year, they were going to take the tumor out, and then for some reason, the day of the surgery, they didn't, which, that's a whole other conversation. And so they said, we're going to just take out the chunk that's causing you pain or whatever. And so I was fine for months, and then maybe around June, it just started hurting a little bit more. And so I remember going back to the doctor, and I remember it vividly, hear her saying it still to this day. And she was like, there's nothing else we can do for you. I take it they didn't just gave me so many opioids, to mask the pain. And this is now I understand why a lot of people are, on this opioid epidemic right now.
Yes.
And so in August, my mom had a dream, and she said that you need to come to Michigan, where I'm from. I grew up in Detroit, because something is not right. Something's not right with my spirit, and I think you need to get a second opinion. I said, Mom, I'll be okay. They say I don't have cancer. She was like, Black mama, get your butt on that plane, and get here. And so I got on the plane, went to the doctors there, and they again say, well, hey, we're going to do an MRI, and we're going to, cut a chunk, the chunk that's caused you, the most discomfort. So I had already heard that in January. So I was like, okay, great. And so I was in the hospital for days. I remember sitting there, and the doctor's assistant came in with this very weary look. And I was like, why are you looking at me like that? And he said, well, I can't really explain to it because I'm not authorized to do so. But I just wanted to let you know that the doctor will, let you know what's going on. So I ended up going back a week later, and the doctor ended up coming in with a skeleton. And I knew from science class, from, being in elementary school, that anything that has to do with a skeleton is not good. So she came in and she said, this tumor is bigger than you think. And I said, well, what do you mean? Because the whole time I thought the tumor was like maybe as big as my thumb, or maybe a little bigger. That's the extent of that. She said, well, this is your right pelvis. You have a grapefruit-sized tumor that's in the front, that's going down your leg, in a part of your thigh, rather. And then you have a double-sized grapefruit tumor under your right butt cheek. I have to amputate your leg. And I gave her the most bizarre look, because the whole time I'm thinking they're just going to remove the tumor. I had no idea that my life was going to change dramatically from me being, becoming an amputee. And I lost it. I was devastated, because I was like, wow, here I am going to the doctors for 2 years. I didn't miss any appointments. Like, why is this happening to me? And so my ego got in the way, and I was like, no, you're not going to take my leg. Let me think about it. I said, I'll let you know. Let me talk to my family. I'll come back in a week. So I went back in a week, and I was like, okay, so where are you going to cut me? Are you going to cut me below the knee, or are you going to cut me above the knee? Because this is what I saw on the internet. And she said, oh, no, you misunderstood me. I'm going to have to remove your entire right pelvis. And then I just lost it again, because then this was another level of like shock, because I didn't know any, or hadn't seen any amputees that had, their entire right pelvis removed. And so I was just numb. And my mom was like, well, how long does he have to, decide on, when he can do the amputation? And she was like, at the time, she was like October, but November will be pushing it. So I ended up going back to my mom's house. I was just like devastated. And so I went and got on the plane, went back to LA, because I was like, I just don't even know what this means. So the whole time I felt like I was walking around like a zombie, because I didn't know what to do. It was like with women with breast cancer, you kind of have like someone to go to, but as far as like a full amputation like that, I didn't know of any outlets and stuff at the time that I can reach out to kind of get some type of support. And so I remember going to Santa Monica Pier, and I went and walked on the beach. I was there by myself, and I remember standing at the, not the bank, but I was standing on the beach, and I was standing where the waves would come up. And I remember this big wave came over my feet, and I said to myself, like, wow, this is going to be the last time that I'm going to feel this water on both of my feet at the same time. And so I ended up going to New York on business for something, and remember they put me on all these opioids, so I ended up running out of drugs, pain medicine rather. And so I remember calling a friend, and I said, hey, can you go to the ER with me? Because at that point I was still in like excruciating pain. And she's like, not a problem. So we got there, and we were standing at this light, and she was just randomly, she said, there's Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital. And I was like, oh, I sent them an email like 2 months ago. Now, this was October when all of this stuff happened, when I was at this light, rather. And so I said, oh, well, they're going to come, they're going to see me, they're going to save my leg. I emailed them 2 months prior, because a friend of mine who was dealing with cancer, colon cancer, had told me about it. So I go in there, and the guy is like, you just can't come in here. This is a private hospital. And I said, I understand. I said, hey, I have chondrosarcoma. I heard this was the best hospital. I sent in, an email. No reply back. So he said, hey, call this number. You got 45 minutes before it closes for the day. So I called the number, and lo and behold, I gave the lady my name, and she said, oh, my God, there was a glitch in the system. So she said, do this, because this was on a Friday. She said, on Monday, have the doctors who diagnosed you in Michigan to send us your medical records, and I'll see what we can do. But just keep in mind, there's a 30-day wait. So at that point, I was like, look, I just want to be optimistic. I waited this long. What's another 30 days? So I faxed her over the thing on Monday, and next thing I know, I think it was at 9 o'clock, I called the hospital. They sent the files over at 9:05. She calls me at 9:30. And I said, hey, did you get the file? She said, yeah, I was calling you because the chief of surgery wants to see you today. And I was like, what? I said, I thought you said it was 30 days. She said, look, this never happens. Don't question it. Just get here. So I get there. She told me how to get there on the train, because at the time I was at a friend's place in downtown Brooklyn. So I get there, and there was like a team of doctors in this room. It was the chief of surgery, a doctor from Tokyo, Japan, like a lead nurse, and like maybe 2 other doctors or 2 other nurses or whatever. So I told them my story or whatever, like I'm telling you, like they were like in shock, because they felt like bad for me because I did everything I was supposed to do out here in LA. And, some people were like, tearing up. And so they had told me that they were starting a new program for chondrosarcoma patients to save their leg. And I was going to be the first candidate. And I lost it. I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, I heard my prayers. This is like, this is a dream come true. And then they were going to set up the surgery I guess they were going to put like a rod or a plate into my hip. But for some reason, because I was so stressed out, the tumor just kept growing rapidly to the point where I remember sleeping at my friend's place in Brooklyn, and I was in so much pain that I was crying the entire night. I got in an Uber, and I just went back to the hospital because they had an emergency center, and I never went home. I never went back to the apartment. I was in the hospital from that day I went on, to the amputation, and they had to come back and retract and told me that they could not save my leg because the tumor is now pressing up against my organs, and if they open me up and it's sticky, they would have to shorten my urethra, remove half of my bladder, part of my intestines. I'll have to have a colonoscopy bag for the rest of my life, and remove half of my colon. So at that point, I was just like over it. I just felt like I just couldn't fight anymore. And I just agreed to do the surgery. But in the process of me getting the good news, after getting the bad news, I was doing research, and I found out that they can do a surgery where they don't have to take the entire pelvis out. They can move half of it and then still keep my butt muscle, which I'll explain why that was important later. The doctor came in and he asked me, was there anything that I wanted to consider? And I said, well, hey, can you, say for my hip and save my butt muscle? And he was like, ironically, that was what I was going to do. How did you know? And I said, well, I went on the internet and I found someone who went the same thing that I went through. And he was like, wow. He said, you're the first person that ever, requested that. So the day before Thanksgiving, the guy comes in and he pulls out a shirt and he does these like initials or whatever on my leg. And I was like, what are you doing that for? He said, oh, we have to do that when we're doing amputations because we don't want to remove the wrong limb. So I was like, oh my God, what's going on? So, they got ready to wheel me down, and of course my mom couldn't go. So my mom gave me this big hug and kiss, and, you know, she was crying a little bit, and she just gave me this weird look. And I remember them wheeling me down, and I said, I immediately went into prayer, and I said, God, please do not let me die from this surgery, because I know my mother is not going to be able to handle it, and parents should not have to bury their kids.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only prayer that I said. You know, I didn't say, you know, I want to walk again, none of that. I just knew that, and my mom's a strong woman, but I just knew in that moment that she would not be able to handle that. I knew it. And so 18 hours later, because that's how long the surgery took, I ended up waking up in the ER, and all I heard was the beep, beep, beep. There was nobody in the room. So to be completely honest, I died. I was like, oh, well, this must be what heaven is like. Like, what is, you know, going on? Nobody's here, you know. And then this woman walks in. And then I'm looking around, because I had eventually woke up from, you know, the anesthesia. And I looked around and I was like, did I die? And she started laughing. She was like, no, sir, Mr. Madison, you're good. The surgery was a success. And I was like, oh, wow. Oh, thank you. And that was just the beginning of, you know, what was to come.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was the beginning of what was to come. And so I kept waking up and I kept going to sleep. And I remember I had flew my mom in. I knew that. And then I kept saying, where's my mother? And they kept saying, she's not here yet. I was like, okay. So then I go back to sleep and I wake up and I was like, wait a minute, my mother is here. I flew her here. Where's my mom? They kept saying she's not here yet. And so what I found out later was because it was such a big surgery, you can't sleep in the ICU with me because I can get an infection and, you know, all hell will break loose. So it wasn't visiting hours, which I never understood why they didn't tell me that, but I think because they didn't want people to go into panic and be demanding, like, I want my wife or I want my mom or whatever. So I understood it later. And so they, doctors would come in every morning at like maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they would literally like rip the bandage off. Like, doctors are not like warm and fuzzy like nurses. They're like, look, we got to see it. So they would come in and they would check the bandage. Now, mentally, I could not allow myself to look down, because though I was on the highest and most legal pain medication that you can have, I think it was fentanyl, I just could not look down and realize that my leg was gone for weeks. And so they would come in and check it, and then they would squeeze it because they wanted to drain it. Because at the time, I had a brace on my left arm, I had a brace on my leg, catheter in my penis, 2 drains from the stump, temporary colonoscopy bag, IV down my throat, thing up my nose, and for some reason they allowed me to have on my favorite hat. I don't even know how that. My mom maybe requested that, and so Then they came in like 2 days later, and they were like, "You have to start doing physical therapy," and I was like, "What?" Because in my mind, I'm like, I just survived 18 hours and you want me to move? And they were like, sir, you can't just lay in the bed, because the medicine has just completely relaxed all of your organs. And if you don't get up, you could get a pulmonary aneurysm and have pneumonia and die. And I was sitting there like, God, now you done took me through all this, and then now I got to think about dying again, you know?
Yeah.
And it was a lot. It was a lot. So they would bring in this crane thing that I would have to pull up. And only thing I had to do was sit up and, you know, at the edge of the bed 20 minutes a day. And it was like the hardest thing in my life, that and breathing into this machine, because I had lost so much weight, because ideally weight is at 200. But at the time, I was only 136 pounds. So I was very, 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 very thin and weak and just, emotional. Like everything would just make me cry. And it wasn't that I was sad. It was just that I was like, why am I going through this? Why am I going through this? Why am I going through this? So to make a long story short, I ended up being in the hospital for 39 days. And I remember the 39th day, it was 2 days before Christmas. And 2 days for Christmas, it was something like that. But they said that the lady came to me, she said, you're going to have a moment where you're going to mourn your leg. And I was like, mourn my leg? What does that mean? And she said, I can't really explain it to you, but you'll know it. So when the car service came to pick me up, I was getting ready to put on my pants. And I put, obviously I put the pant on, or the pant on my left leg. And I was ready to put the pant on my right leg and completely forgot that my leg was gone, and I lost it. And that same nurse came in and she said, this is what I was telling you. This is mourning your leg. You're going to have these moments where you're going to miss your leg. You're going to remember doing things or whatever. Just understand that it's a part of the process. Mm-hmm. And so I was in New York for almost, over a year, because I couldn't go home because I had the colonoscopy bag, and then I still had to do multiple surgeries. I had to do cleanup surgery. I had to have the colonoscopy bag changed. It was just a lot. And so the doctors was like, well, you can't go home. You have to check into a hotel. And I was like, damn, I'm going to lose, spend all of my savings. And then people did a GoFundMe. And I was like, New York is expensive. Like, what am I going to do? So luckily the hospital was a private hospital, and they had like grants that wealthy people provided. They put this money in this pot, and you would basically fill out these documentations, and they would just give you money. And then I didn't know that the American Cancer Society, pays, hotel bills if you're, a resident from a different state. So the American Cancer Society, thank God for them, they put me and my mom in a hotel for months, and we didn't have to pay a dime. And the most we paid was $34.50. And that was like I don't know why we had to pay it, but we didn't care. It was more than $3,000 or whatever it would have cost. Yeah. And so they put us in an extended stay in Jersey. Luckily, the hospital was private, so they had car service, and they would pick us up. I had to do like 3 or 4 appointments a day. Not a day, but a week. And so they would do that, and then I started to get into like a little bit of depression because I was in a relationship at the time, and the person I was in a relationship with ended the relationship in the middle of all of that. So that devastated me more than the surgery, because I was like, man, if I go home, even though I lost everything, I lost my apartment, I couldn't work. I just lost everything. I was like, at least I have my fiance there to have my back, to just give me a sense of home. All of that was gone. Mm-hmm. And so my mom noticed that I was going through like this, like the depressed day, because I didn't want to eat anything. I just was literally laying in the bed all day. And so she said, get up, we're about to go somewhere. And I was like, where are we going? It's freezing outside. And she was like, don't worry about it, just get up. So my mom helps me get into the wheelchair. We leave out, it's freezing in New York. And luckily there was a Walmart that was like a half a mile away. My mom wheels me to Walmart. We get in there, and I was like, what are we doing at Walmart? We already got food. Like, what are we doing here? And she took me in the aisle where they had the journals. And she said, pick one. And I said, why am I picking a journal? She was like, baby, if I can give you my legs, I will give you my legs. But I don't know what you're going through, and I don't want you to hold all of that in your system, just get a journal and just start writing down how you feel. You don't have to be apologetic about it. If you want to curse people out or whatever, just, put it in a journal. So I did that, and that completely saved my life, because I know I was saying some stuff in there that I knew that I just couldn't say out loud, And so I just went through that process of that. And then my contract ended with the American Cancer Society, and I still couldn't go home because I had to have that colonoscopy bag reversed, and I still had to do follow-up surgery and all of that. And so this church in New York had an apartment that they let Memorial Sloan Kettering patients use, that are, from the state. And so they was like, well, we don't know if it's available, but we'll ask them. And thank God it was. And so the apartment was in one of the most wealthiest places in New York. It was on the Upper East Side at 71st and Madison. So I thought, I'm all about spirituality and, just things, work the way it's supposed to work. So I thought it was interesting that it was at 71st and Madison, and then my last name was Madison.
Yeah.
And then the apartment is in like the most wealthy area in New York, because at 71st and Park Avenue, which is one block over, that's where 1% of the billionaires live, in this one big building. All of these big billionaires live in this one big building. And how I knew that is because I watched this documentary before, and I remembered the address. And then on the other block was Central Park. And I was like, this just has to be a dream. So I remember we went and got the keys, we packed up everything, moved on the extended stay. And I remember going in to this apartment, and it had this foyer. And I just started crying again. And I was like, this is for me? And they were like, yes. So it was like this whole apartment for me and my mom. And I was just like so grateful, so grateful. They said, you can stay here as long as you want. You don't have to pay anything. Every Thursday we have, dinner that we generally do for the homeless, but, the staff eat food and stuff as well. Just make sure that you, come down and eat if you're hungry. My mom ended up having to leave, and they were like, well, you can stay in the apartment, but you can't live here by yourself because, health reasons. So I ended up calling one of my friends. So I talked to my friend and I said, hey, you want to come stay with this apartment with me? You don't have to worry about any money or anything. It's completely free. And she was like, what? Because she was living in like some shithole in like Jersey. And so next thing I know, 3 hours later, because I'm thinking she's coming the next day, because I told her, give me 24 hours. She was there in 3 hours with all her stuff. And I was like, what is going on? She was like, look, you said I ain't got to pay no rent. I can save my money. I'm going to be here, And when I tell you, Giannis, it was the most liberating experience in my life, because at the time I hadn't even had the prosthetic. I was literally going around New York, going to doctor's appointments, because luckily the hospital was within maybe a 3-mile radius of the apartment. So I would just get up like maybe an hour early and then just go to the doctor offices, for my appointments in the wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And the wheelchair, being a wheelchair user, opened my eyes on how people treat people in wheelchairs. Like oh my God, it was some points where I would literally be waiting at the corner, waiting on the light to change. And it would be like a fancy restaurant or whatever. And these people would come out and they would just like throw their food at me and was like, here, you hungry? Not allow me to give them a response. They would just like literally throw it in my lap. Like, here's some food. And I was like, first of all, you're rude, and I'm not homeless. I'm waiting on the light to change. And it was just like crazy, stuff like that. And I remember seeing this guy who was a vet. He was at the corner. I was on my way to the gym. It was on Park Avenue. I think 57, and he had no legs. I still had my one. He had none. And I looked at him and I was like, damn, I could have no legs. And so we kind of made that, it's kind of like when women, I spoke earlier about breast cancer, we kind of related to each other. We got it. So he thought I was in the war, and I was like, no, I'm not, was not in the war. I was, had a bout with bone cancer. I remember going to the gym, and I was still out there, and it was still kind of cold. And he just wanted some food, and I had went to CVS or somewhere, and I had all these grocery bags on my the back of my wheelchair. And I remember passing by him, and I gave him this look. And then something told me to go wheel myself back. And I don't know how much money I had in my pocket. It could have been $100, whatever it was. I just pulled all the money out of my pocket and gave it to the guy. And he looked at me and he was like, why did you give me this money, man? Like, I mean, you're homeless too. And I said, no, I'm not homeless. I'm actually on my way to my apartment. But I just felt the need that I needed to help you. And he started crying. And I said, well, why are you crying? And he was like, man, I've been on this, he said, I've been on this corner for like hours, and none of these wealthy, people have, they just walk past me like I'm trash. And I said, well, you're not trash. And I said, don't let these people, dictate who you are as a person. You're still human, and just know it's going to get better. I know people have probably said it to you before, but I was just compelled to tell him that. And he was like, man, you don't even understand, like, this money you gave me is going to help me eat, for, a whole week, if not longer. And I just really appreciate it. God bless you, whatever. And I just felt really, really good about that. And generally, I don't speak on stuff like that because I'm not the type of person to try to, utilize this for me to look at, publicly or whatever. I just felt like I need to talk about it because sometimes we don't know what people are going through.
Exactly.
And I just felt like it was just compelling for me to help that guy at this time. And still to this day, I still wonder if he's okay, because New York is cold in the wintertime. It's not like LA will get a little cold. I mean, it's like, 10 feet of snow some days. So I still to this day wonder, what that guy is doing and if he's okay. Overall, I ended up staying in New York, like I said, until I think it was December 19th, 2015. I ended up getting my prosthetic quicker than I thought. And they told me, like, this never happens because most people usually have to wait 2 to 3 years. And I was just optimistic the entire time because I felt like God spoke over me and was like, look, if you get through this, I got you the rest of the way. Just keep fighting, just keep pushing. And that's what I was doing. I made sure I didn't hang around anybody that was negative. There were sometimes doctors would come in and say, well, you may not get approved for the prosthetic, and I would just cut them off in mid-sentence and say, don't put that type of spirit on my blessing. I'm going to get this prosthetic and I'm going to get the best one. And you guys should stop telling people that, because what happened to somebody in the past does not mean that this is going to happen to someone currently in the future. Yes. Y'all should be optimistic across the board. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But you shouldn't instill that in me and I'm going into it feeling like I'm not going to get it. And I ended up getting the most expensive prosthetic, and I ended up getting the prosthetic that just came out, So I was just very grateful and humble by that. And I just took that opportunity to find out who I am as a person. And I had to not only mourn my leg, but I had to mourn the old Jerris because I kept holding on to him. And I, even like old clothes, I keep like certain clothes and, now with the prosthetic, I can't wear certain things. And, now that I have a new prosthetist, he actually gave me he redid my prosthetic leg, and now I have like a partial butt and a whole eye. So now I can wear like jeans and slacks, and they fill out without it just being this flappy part, because it just was mainly just a pole there. So, with that just being said, I'm very grateful that I came out of that horrific, traumatic experience in my life, and just I have a positive outlet about it.
Yeah.
I know that my leg will never come back, and I know I'm going to be okay.
And thank God for your mom. Oh my
God, yes.
You have such an amazing mother. I mean, she gave birth to you, and it sounds like she saved your life.
She did. She gave birth to me again.
Rebirth.
Exactly. It felt like a rebirth, and I'm so grateful for that experience, and I tell her all the time, thank you. And it just made us closer. I opened up about, traumatic things that I went through in my childhood. She opened up about traumatic things that went on in her childhood. And it just made me see her differently outside of just mom. Not that I didn't see her as a human being, but I saw her other than her just being my mom, and know that she has her own level of baggage just like anybody does. So I'm very grateful for my mother.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you this core question.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone who's diagnosed with cancer, or, they have somebody that they love, what's some advice that you would tell them who's might be currently going through this, or they're going to have to go through this, or maybe, just like you were saying, being in a wheelchair? I think, when we're kids, sometimes, we see somebody in a wheelchair, you're in elementary school and your parents, don't look at that person. Don't look at it. It's rude.
Mm-hmm.
It's rude. What advice would you say for all that?
Well, on the first part, as far as the cancer part, because people hit me a lot via Instagram DM, whether someone lost their leg through an accident, or, or dealing with an amputation or cancer. I always tell people you have to allow people to grieve and to vent, because we as humans, we tend to become selfish, because you have to understand that this person is not the same person pre-diagnosis or pre-amputation. This is a whole new, situation that you have to deal with. And and I know for me, you think that you're going to die, or what is the quality of life going to be like? And so I say, just listen, just be an ear for someone. It's not about giving an opinion. Just listen, allow them to go through the process, and just be there for them. Some people are extreme than others, but just listen. They can never say that you didn't listen to them. And I would say, as far as like even with me with my prosthetic, oh my God, like people stare at me all the time. And in the beginning, it was a lot, because I'm already 6'4", and I'm a big guy, you know what I'm saying? And people, especially children, would look at me and they would point. I know I got a fly prosthetic, so in my mind, I'm dope. They're fascinated by my dopeness. You know what I'm saying? So even with that, I just was like, it is what it is. It's my reality. And pre-prosthetic, when I was in the wheelchair, I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. People are going to look at you. They're going to stare at you, but you can't allow that to make you feel bad about your circumstances, because people have to understand, you see, and you look at these people and you shame them with your eyes, you snap your fingers, that can be you. So you have to have a level of compassion when you're looking at people who are in a situation where they're dealing with cancer or are handicapped, because that can be you. And I tell people that all the time, just be kind and just understand that one day that can be you.
Yeah, it can happen to anybody. I mean, I've known you for a long time. It's been over, I think, 10 years. And,
yeah.
And I mean, it's, this is something we never even think about.
No.
So
at all.
sometimes, yeah, I mean, so sometimes we think we're invincible. One thing that I want to talk about especially is your baby. You started Obvious Magazine 11 years ago. Why did you bring Obvious Magazine to the market? And what are some of the greatest things that came out of having this incredible and beautiful magazine?
Well, first of all, thank you for being, because you were the first male cover model at the time
Yeah,
when you were doing modeling.
beautiful picture.
It was you and this amazing woman named Zoe. You guys were the first ones on the cover. I had started Obvious out of, I can show you better than I can tell you. And what happened was I was working with a magazine called Crave, and Will, who's the publisher, we just fell out creatively, and I wanted more, and it was just a lot. And I mean, this is public knowledge. I mean, we've since dissolved the perplexity of our relationship, but I was like, I'm going to show him what I'm trying to convey. So I ended up creating Obvious because with me being a photographer and being a wardrobe stylist, men would hit me up and say, hey, I'm trying to, find something for my girl. Can you help me pick out something? And vice versa with women. And so I said, well, why don't I create a magazine for both men and women? And at the time, everybody told me it was a dumb idea. You can't do that. You got to pick one or the other. It has to be niche. And I said, well, how come you can't combine them? It creates more conversation. It creates more dialogue. And so I just stuck with my gut. So I remember sitting at my desk in LA at the time, and this was right off the call when I quit Crave. I was like, this is it. I'm over it. And I wrote down like 20 magazine names, and I Googled them, and all of them were taken. And then at the time, I had a company named It's Obvious Inc. I don't even know why I named it that, but it was called It's Obvious Inc. And I remember writing it on a white sheet of paper, big. And so my phone rang, and I tripped over my desk to go get the phone from across the room. And when I came back, something had covered up the It's and something had covered up the ink, and the only word that was showing was Obvious.
Oh my God.
So I was talking, I know, right? So I was talking to my friend Spirit on the phone, and at the time she was the editor-in-chief of Crave. And I said, what do you think about a magazine named Obvious? And she said, it's obvious you should name it that. That's sarcasm. So I immediately bust out laughing, and I Googled it, and lo and behold, Obvious magazine was not taken. And this was during the MySpace days. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. And I mean, there was Facebook, but it was only for like college kids.
Yeah.
And there was no Instagram. There was not Tumblr, none of that. And so I went on there. I went to GoDaddy, and I purchased obviousmag.com and obviousmag.net immediately. And then that's how I ended up forming Obvious at my desk almost 11 years ago.
Dang, that's a great story. It's amazing how like everything just falls into place. You trip,
yes.
and something moves around, and it just comes together like it's supposed to.
It did. And still to this day, I'm still like, I cannot believe it.
I didn't realize I was the first person on the cover. Thank you. That's really cool.
Yep, you were on the debut cover. It was you and Zoe. And it's so crazy because when I look at it now, compared to where we were, because I designed the first cover, didn't know what the hell I was doing, didn't know anything about typography or word placement, cover lines, none of that. But you grow, from that or whatever. And of course, I'm not ashamed of it, but I knew where I was, and I know where I'm at. So I'm so grateful that you allowed yourself to be a part of that experience.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and the thing that's so important to remember is a lot of times people, they want to do something, but they don't know how to do it. So they just like, well, I don't know how to do it, so I'm not going to do it. But the most important thing is you're honest. I don't know how to do this, but you figure it out, and you keep on working and working and working.
Exactly.
You know what? You get really good at it.
Exactly.
So one thing I wanted to mention, I mean, everybody who knows you, they know you're a badass photographer. And I just noticed
Thank you.
you're welcome. And you did a Target commercial. How was that experience being on the other side of the room? Because that's completely different.
Well, let me explain, like my life now, like Jerris, post-surgery, I'm loving him because I travel more internationally as an amputee than I did when I had two human legs. And how I ended up getting the Target thing, this guy that I know was signed with this agency here in LA. And there was a brand last year that was they was doing an inclusion campaign, and they wanted all different types of men. And they were specifically looking for the amputee. And so he said, hey, you should apply for this. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I'm a photographer. I don't know how to submit. So he said, hey, I'm signed with this agency called Aqua Talent. Why don't you send me 5 images and I'll have my agency submit it on your behalf. And I said, they'll do that? He was like, yeah. So they submitted it. And then I went to the casting call for men, very well-dressed men, or, having your personal style. So I'm not working on a suit collection designed by me that's coming out in 2020. So ironically, I had one of the suits there that the guy from Ghana sent me one of the samples. So I was like, I'm wearing one of my suits, So I go in, of course I'm overdressed because everybody in there is dressed like, shorts or whatever. And I was like, did they read the description of this thing? So I was like, whatever, that ain't got nothing to do with me. So I went in there and they put us in the line. You have to say your name, how old you are, a little bit about yourself. And so I was like the 4th to the 5th person. So the guy looks at me and he was like, hey, don't you go to One Church LA? And I said, yeah. He said, oh my God, you're that amputee guy that dressed very well. So I'm gagging, right? And he was like, oh man, you wear them cool suits and you got on one day. So we're having this full-on conversation. And everybody in the room is looking at us like, we're in this room too. So then he kind of caught himself. He was like, oh, let me focus. So he had, told me my pitch. And then I was just like, wow. So they said that they were going to be doing callbacks. I didn't even know what callbacks were. So he said they were going to be calling people like the next day or whatever. So I waited the next day. I didn't get the call. Waited the next day after that, didn't get a call. So I was like, wow, okay, I guess they went with somebody else. So I was literally sitting on my bed and I was like, God, if it's meant for me to get this job, I surrender it. I remember saying it like it's clear as day. And when I literally got up off my bed to get ready to go take a shower, my phone rings. And it was the agency, and they said, congratulations, you got the job. And I was like, what? And I started bawling, like crying. And he said, why are you crying? He was like, dude, do you know what I went through? Like, I've been through hell. And to get this, and someone wants me because I'm an amputee, I'm like bawling. And he said, have you ever done like a campaign and stuff before? I said, no. I said, I'm the guy that's usually on the other side. And he said, dude, like this never happens. He said, we haven't even signed you and you already booked a national campaign. And I was like, I'm just as shocked as you are. And so I ended up doing the campaign. It was like immediate, like that weekend. And it came out like a month later. I was really excited about that. And so I just kept going to castings after castings, and some you don't get called back for, or they don't call you immediately. And so I was on my way to Boston to do a hotel review. And then I get this text from my agency saying that you got a call back from Target. I was like, Target? Like, what? And I remember going to that casting. That was way in February. So I completely forgot about it because I was like, oh, they probably went with somebody else. But what I found out with them big corporations, they keep these auditions and these castings on reserve. So when they get ready to do stuff, they go and pull from the reserve, and I was one of the guys they picked. So I go in and they said, hey, we want you to act like you're at a movie night with friends, and then we want you to act like you're receiving the package, because they put this whole package, receiving packages to your door. So I ended up doing the casting, and then I got on the plane immediately that day and went to Boston. And my agency hit me back and said, you're on hold. It's between you and 3 other guys. And I said, well, what does hold mean? He said, they like you, and they're just going to decide if they're going to pick you or whatever. So immediately I went into prayer again, and I surrendered it. And so I was like, you know what? I'm about to go clear my mind. I'm about to go see Endgame at the movies. And, that movie was 3 hours long.
Yeah.
So I come out of the movie theater, and they're like, all these 310 calls. And I was like, who is this calling me from 310? And the agency called me and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that you booked the Target gig. You got the commercial.
Wow.
I'm literally in the middle of Boston screaming. And these people are looking at me like I'm crazy. I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And he's like, they're probably going to start shooting Sunday. And I was like, oh man, I'm in Boston. So I had to book a flight to go back home because I didn't want to miss the fitting. And so they ended up moving the fitting to Monday. I'm glad that I left anyway, because they ended up canceling flights out of Boston because the weather was like super bad. And so I meant to say, like, when I booked the first clothing campaign, I ended up going in to the agency after, like, that week after the doing that booking, and sat down with the commercial influencer agent, and he signed me on the spot. And he was like, man, you're an amazing, I like your story. He was like, it's amazing that you don't look like what you went through. And I said, well, that's honest to God's truth. And so he looked at me, he turned his head. He said, hold on for a minute. I want to take you into the next office. I think you need to meet the theatrical agent. So I go in there, and she, I tell her a little bit of my story, and I kept looking at her, and I was like, you must be from like New York. And she said, how you know? I said, because you're very direct. And she said, ironically, I am. So we clicked immediately. So she ended up signing me too. So the same day, I ended up getting a commercial influencer agency and a theatrical agent all in the same day. And I'm just literally in there like crying. And I'm not a crybaby. I was just emotional because I've always wanted an agent, but I always wanted one for photography. I never thought about getting an agent for like commercials or, doing theater or movies. And so that was just like a aha moment for me. And that, I felt like that was like God blessing me again, because I didn't give up from, going through what I went through. And so I've been on, more castings or whatever, and I have other things in the works. Right now I'm working on a short film about, loosely based on my life, about an amputee that's going to lead into an actual television series. So we're going to be filming that this fall, and pushing that next year to the film circuit, and then we go into go into the television series. So everything is being co-written and executive produced by me, and I'm actually playing the amputee in the short film and the series. And so I feel like nobody can tell my story better than me. And I'm a specific type of amputee, and most amputees you see are cut below the knee or above the knee. You don't see any hemipelvectomy amputees that are cut below their right butt cheek. So I felt like it was important for me to play this role, because I want the 1% of hemipelvectomy amputees around the world to see someone that looks like them.
Yeah, that's very, very important.
Thank you.
Yeah, because Actually, I've worked in physical therapy, so we've had several people who are amputees, but just like you said, we've never had anybody like you, to be honest.
Yeah. And I found out I'm part of the 1%. So when I find other people online that look like me, I kind of resonate to them more because they understand that, like even when prosthetics come out, we're not considered the first choice because there's not like a barrage of amputees that are cut like us. So we're kind of like a second thought. So my goal is to change that narrative to allow people to see us just like they see everybody else.
Yeah. What's next for you besides?
Ultimately, I still want to do obvious, and I know like with anything that you do, it has this expiration date. So I want to become more of a producer and a television series writer. And I also would love to become a venture capitalist because I want to be able to take my money to invest in other people's dreams, whether it's films or businesses, particularly people that are in the Black space. And it's not that I have any issues with, any Caucasian, men or women. I just want to be able to create more opportunity for people that look like me.
That's great.
Because we don't get a lot of opportunities as African Americans. So if I have the power to do so, then I'm going to, take that opportunity to allow me to use my resources to make another person's dream become a reality.
That is great. And one thing, I absolutely love about you is, you have so much diversity into your photography as well. Because, honestly, you meet some photographers, they only shoot a certain type of race of people, and
Exactly.
It's like, why are you doing that? It's like, there's so many, as someone who's modeled for quite a few times, like, there's so many models who are so gorgeous, but a lot of people, unfortunately, they won't work with them because they look a certain way. And it's great that,
Exactly.
you have that outlet where it's like, no, you don't have to look that way. You can look anyway, and I will accept you because they're beautiful people.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
great.
And I'm glad you pointed that out because that's intentional with me because a lot of my peers that are photographers and creatives as well, they're like, how come you're always working? I said, because you guys are so sold on, shooting certain types of people. And that's just not how I operate. I just like shooting people. That's how I'm very blessed, shooting so many different types of people because I just love people. And so right now I'm in the process of restructuring my vision and just really diving into shooting, what I love as opposed to just, shooting stuff just because I want to get a paycheck.
Yeah. No, I mean, just for example, I'm not going to say his name, but there's a photographer I know in New York. I've worked with him several times. Good guy. He's extremely good.
Mm-hmm.
He's worked with all the big magazines, very, very successful. But unfortunately, I've noticed with him, he only shoots Caucasian models. He doesn't shoot models of color. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people like what they like, but I always feel like you're limiting who you are as a creative person, and it stops opportunities where people may say, hey, I'm working on this movie. I want to shoot a movie poster. You may get passed on that particular opportunity because you're not as, so may not be as diverse. Now, I'm not saying you got to go out and do food and dogs and, all of that stuff, but we're in a very inclusive space right now, and I feel like people need to be a little bit more diverse. But however, on the flip side, that just may be his comfort zone. Sometimes some people just may be comfortable shooting that, and this is what they're good at. And if you feel that's what you're good at, then, go in that space as well too. But I know for me, I just like shooting all different types of people.
That's great. And thank you for doing it. This is, I think, very important. So for those who are serious about stepping into the world of modeling or becoming a photographer, what advice do you think that they really, really need to know? And then also too, some photographers go to college. I know you did. Is this something that you would recommend for photographers to do? Go to school?
Well, as you know, brother, when we met, we didn't have all of the resources that people have now. I mean, look at the young kid who shot the Beyonce for Vogue. Like, this kid didn't, really go to college. I mean, he didn't have a big name. Nowadays, it's just, you have to be pretty much a triple threat, and just really be good at what you do and just have your own voice. And thank, God, there's Instagram, because a lot of people are just literally being discovered on Instagram. Like, there's this amazing photographer out of Ghana. He couldn't afford a camera, but he started shooting these amazing portraits on his iPhone and ended up getting a contract deal with Apple. And his work is being shown in these museums in San Francisco and all over the United States. Damn. And it's just all from being discovered on Instagram. So you don't necessarily have to go to college. I just say, I mean, now we're living in the Amazon days. You can get a inexpensive Canon Rebel, and you just have to just go out and shoot. And you have to understand Kelvin temperature, which is lighting, and know when to shoot and when not to shoot, because some of the best light is early in the morning. And then there's that peak time, which what they call high noon. And it's usually, like, depending on the time of year, like from 10 to like maybe 3, you don't really want to shoot because the sun is so high and it's over the person's head. And it tends to create this raccoon effect under the eyes. So you kind of, don't want to shoot around that time. And so what I usually do is I shoot a lot of my African-American models who have like a lot of rich melanin. I usually shoot them like after 3, because that's when the sun is the warmest. And then I'll shoot a lot of my Caucasian models in the morning, because that's when the sun is a little bit more cooler. So that's how I kind of get my effect, my technique, and it works for me. But, just assist, with the photographer. Hit a photographer up and say, hey, you need an assistant. Everything is not about money. Just assist them and just get the knowledge and just see how they do it. And it's not about you trying to copy their particular style. Just, go on there and just use the opportunity to hone your craft, and then you get your own particular style. And lastly, like, I'm obsessed with Tumblr and Pinterest. You can go on there, and especially Pinterest, and type in fashion portraits and just create these either public boards or private boards, and just look at the lighting. And if you want to know what the lighting is just either look at the shadows or look in the person's eyes, and you can tell what the lighting is. And then that's how you can just start, honing your own style. And you can mimic what they're doing. You don't have to like style it the exact same, but you may like the feel of it. And that would be my recommendation for you, to just try to figure out how to create your own voice. And then just, slowly put yourself out there through Instagram. And one of the things that I want to tell photographers too, that they should not do online, like, you'll see photographers, and I know some of these photographers are my friends, but they'll put like, hey, I'm running these specials for headshots for $150, X amount of edits or whatever. Do not do that, because what happens is it cheapens your work, and then you'll get people who have huge followings that have the money, and they're going to pay you that low rate that you've asked for, and then they're getting all of this usage from your work. You should base your pricing based on usage and, what the person is going to, obviously use for the images. And don't, lowball yourself like that, because generally people who pay the lowest amount of money sometimes are the most demanding. and then you're going to end up hating the project and hating the shoot, and then you may not even use the images at all. So if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to figure out how to price stuff, just ask somebody who's already doing it, so then that way you don't lowball yourself.
Yeah, well, and then you made a good point. I think also too, what people would do is like, I'm gonna work with this guy or I'm gonna work with this lady. They're a really good photographer, but I know like every 6 months they have this special. So instead of paying them full price, let me wait a couple months because I know they're gonna throw out this special. And then you have all these people who follow you who will usually pay you for what you're worth, but they're gonna wait and wait and wait and wait, and you're really stabbing yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And then what happens is, anything you put online, it's there forever. So then people will screenshot that and they'll be like, oh, I don't have the money this month. I'll wait until 90 days or whatever. And then they're in your DMs with this, hey, I want to, book this. And you're like, oh, I did that, 3 months ago, or maybe even 3 years ago. So, you're not Kmart or Olin Mills. So you don't need to put those type of prices and stuff like that. Just, you can say, hey, I got opportunities, a special rate, DM me, privately, and then we can just see what we can do. And that would be my recommendation for that.
Yeah. And then charge based on the project, because, you have 2 people in pictures, but some people might want 3 pictures. Some people might want 10. And then you just change your prices as you do.
Exactly.
You made a really good point with lighting, because if you're shooting people who have a different, they're a little darker, they're a little lighter, you change the light, or you mentioned with the different times of the day with the sun and stuff. Now, for some photographers, how would you address this? You're working with people who are different shades of skin. So you're working with someone who's Caucasian, you have someone who's a little bit darker. How do they manage your light with that?
That's when you have to understand what it means to have your particular style, because it's almost kind of like, this is a rule of mine. Because at one point I was teaching photography classes to, photographers who wanted to get into the photography community. And I would tell them, I always told them, if you cannot master daylight, the God-given light outside, then you will not understand studio light. You have to master daylight. And the cool thing about the sun, when the sun is up, you move the person around until you get that light right where you want it to be. That's the same rule of thumb that you use in the studio. With the studio, you're just moving the light around where the subject can just stay there. And so that's why it's important to just go online. Like I was telling you earlier, when we first met, we didn't have all these resources. You can find anything on the internet and stuff for free. You can go on Vimeo and find videos by other creatives about lighting. I mean, you can find it on YouTube too, but I find that YouTube is for like a good, like makeup tutorials, drama, funny stuff. And then Vimeo is for like the super professional, creative people that want people to take them serious, and they're not focused on like subscribers and likes. They just really are out here trying to educate you. And so you have to constantly educate yourself about lighting and light meters. And I mean, a lot of times we don't have to use light meters and stuff like we used to because of, shooting digital. And then a lot of times people do, fix stuff in post-production. I will say, when I was going to Creative Circus, our department head of photography, Greg Strelecki, which I'll never forget, he said, Photoshop is not to fix what you should have did on set. Photoshop should be used to enhance what you've already done. And that's what people get misconstrued, because they'll do shitty work on set and be like, oh, don't worry about it, I'll fix it in Photoshop. And then you're doing Photoshop for 10 hours on one photo.
I heard
that's not what Photoshop, that's not what Photoshop is for. You're supposed to be able to perfect it and then go in there and just tweak what you need to do on set. So then that way you're able to have a quicker turnaround and then allow your clients to rebook you for jobs because they're like, oh, we like working with Jerris because he gave us a great experience. So you want to just keep that in mind and just continue to educate yourself and just start, like even with Instagram now, you can create little folders on the back end and bookmark images. So I have like one that says fashion, one that says makeup, inspiration, retouchers. I mean, they have amazing retouchers that are in these foreign countries like India and Copenhagen and Russia that'll charge you like $10 to $25 per image, which is very inexpensive. And so with me being a fashion photographer, I'm getting more into doing beauty, though I like doing retouching, but I'm so busy now. I'd rather take that extra money and pay this retoucher that I found that's amazing to do my work, as opposed to me just sitting up hours and hours and hours, because I know that her work, my work and her retouching is going to allow me to bring in bigger and better jobs, which is, that's the opportunity that I've created. So you want to, keep that in mind. But in the beginning, you need to know how to retouch your own work.
We're working in the industry. I've noticed, there's a few photographers, dang, they're so good. Literally, the picture that comes out of the camera, they can pretty much use it. They don't need to edit it because they work so hard to make sure the lighting and everything is so great. The makeup, the hair, everything is so great. Where there's some photographers, they will literally say, oh, who cares? I'll fix it in Photoshop. But then they're spending hours having to edit all that stuff.
Exactly. And so I don't ever want to do that. I'm very anal. Like anybody will tell you, when I'm on set, I will test that light 10 times if I have to. And I'll make sure the collars and all that stuff is great. So then I don't have to go in there and do all of that extensive retouching. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, because you'd rather spend your time on something else. Wanted to ask you, so what is your life purpose? Because you have a lot of purposes.
Oh, that's a very good question. What is my life purpose? I would say my life purpose is to allow people who are in my space, whether it's face-to-face on the internet, and say, because of who he is, he makes me want to be a better person. That, I would say, would be my life purpose, because we're so inundated with so much negativity, and I'm so grateful. Even now, people come on my page and they're like, oh my God, I'm just so inspired by you. And, people that know me pre-surgery to now, and they're like, man, I just look at you and you just keep moving. And that makes me proud, because sometimes I'll get in my head and I'm like, I don't think people really seeing like, what I'm going through, or what I've done to get to this point. And every now and then someone will come in and say, hey, I remember when you posted this, or I screenshot this. Remember you did this. This helped me get over a bad relationship, or helped, made me decide that I need to quit my job and start my own business. Like, that's what life should be about. We're so bombarded with so much negativity with the media and, what's going on in the government right now. And if I can create a breath of fresh air into somebody's life, then that's what it's all about.
I completely agree, especially with negativity. About a week ago, I have an iPhone and they have the news things that always pop up, and negative, someone died, someone got shot, so someone killed someone's baby, and all this negative stuff. And it just like reels us in, and it literally makes you stressed and depressed and all this stuff. And I like, what, I'm so sick of this crap. So I literally removed off my phone. And it feels so good when you don't have to listen to that stuff. Yeah, because it's so important to surround yourself with wonderful, empowering people who really make you feel good about yourself. And we can
Exactly. And that's my, my thought process, because you have to keep in mind the algorithms show you what you're looking at all the time. And so a lot of the Instagram pages, like the Shade Room, Baller Alert, those, I've actually blocked those, because I don't even want them to show up in my feed. And it's no shade to them. People, they have an audience, do your thing, make your money. But for me, I want to be able to look at my feed and see that someone is, out here making a difference in someone's life. And like even with Shaun King, I love Shaun King. He's like this activist, but it's so much sometimes. And that's somebody I would love to interview because I'm like, how do you put up so much of this stuff every day and not allow it to be in your mental psyche? And so recently, over the last 24 days, I got back into meditating. I got back into journaling. And when I tell you that it has completely transformed my life, like I go into situations feeling inspired. I don't let things easily get me offended. I go into castings more like, hey, how everybody's doing, and I'm just living my best life, And so I do my meditating in the morning, and then I started doing the 5 a.m. challenge. And the breakdown on that is like from every 20 minutes, you're doing something different. So from 5 to 5:20, you go into movement, like some type of exercise. And then from 5:20 to 5:40, gratitude. So this is where I journal. I read my Bible verses, anything that has to do with me cleansing my mind. And then for the last 20 minutes, it's about learning. So I either read a book or learn something new. Like I'll type in like inspirational quote on Instagram or entrepreneur hashtag, and then I'll learn something new and I'll bookmark that. And then from there on, I just start my day. And it works for me because the East Coast people are still kind of asleep, and the people over here on the West Coast are still asleep. So I don't have to worry about no one texting me, calling me, because they're thinking I'm asleep, but I'm up. But I don't let people know I'm up, because when you do, especially on the East Coast, they're like, hey, I know you up. I saw you just posted, and I still won't answer their call until after 6 o'clock, because I need that time for me.
That's good. No, I love that. Yeah, because, working in PT, you deal with people who get injuries. They sometimes lose legs and that kind of stuff. And most of these people, they become very depressed. And it's amazing how you've completely changed your life. I'm like, in such a beautiful way. Like, and you keep on, your purpose it keeps on changing, and you keep on inspiring other people. And that's just, it's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I know tomorrow's not promised. The next minute is not promised. So I wake up with a sense of gratitude every day. Even if I had a bad day before, when I wake up, I was like, I woke up today. I ain't got nothing to complain about, because I can, my black behind could be dead, And so I consciously remind people that, and I'll put up something like, if you're reading this, that means you're still alive, and people are like, wow, you're so right, because there's somebody that didn't wake up this morning, And so like, even in my phone, bro, like I don't have anybody in my phone that I don't like. If I don't like you, you are not in my phone. I don't want your number popping up. I don't want to see your name. Like, I don't have time for that. And so I'm very conscious of my space, and people don't even realize that your space, even on your Instagram or Facebook page or just social media as a whole, that's your space. And I don't argue with people on the internet. I just block you and keep moving. I'm not about to argue with you on the internet. You're not paying my Sprint bill. You know what I'm saying? So I don't argue with people. I have, I may have a heated discussion and that, go into in-depth conversation, but I'm not about to argue with you on the internet. And there's some very argumentative people on the internet that just love to troll people. I'm not about to argue with you. I got shit to do.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because how many times, there are people who will literally sit there on Instagram or Facebook and they will spend hours arguing with somebody, and you're just wasting your time, you're wasting your energy. And then going back to the phone thing too, it's like how many people they're walking around somewhere, they get a phone call, they look at like and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this person, I don't want to talk to this person. I can't stand this person. Like, why do you have
Exactly.
this person's number even in your phone? Just like you said,
Exactly. That's me.
that is good. I like that. And you know, that's the thing. We're constantly changing. We're constantly growing. So yeah, no, that's good. I like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Going back when you first started out in the industry, would you do anything differently? And if you would, what would it be?
I ask myself that question a lot. And I remember in the past, I used to say, oh, I would change this and change that. And I remember I'll have these interesting situations that happened to me that changed my thought process. So I remember I went out to this club in New York with some friends of mine. And this was when I just had the wheelchair. I was still out partying with that wheelchair, believe it or not. Had the best time of my life. And I remember leaving out of the club and my friends were still there. It was over by 42nd Street or something in New York. And there were these brownstones along the street. So, you know, a lot of times people sit down on the stoop. And I remember sitting on the stoop and this Indian woman passed by me. And she was like, what's your name? And I said, Jerris. And she was like, you have a really nice aura about you. I don't know what it is. I don't know how you lost your leg or whatever, but you have like positive energy. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. Now in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, she's about to pull out some tarot cards and try to get some money out of my pocket, you know, whatever. It was none of that. And so she looked at me and she said, have you ever heard of Maya Angelou? And I said, yes. And she said, have you ever read her book, I Wouldn't Change Anything from My Journey? And I said, no. And she said, you should read it. Now, the title alone, I've since read it and she was right. The title alone completely changed my life because everything that I went through got me through to this point. And if I was to alter that or change anything, then I wouldn't be where I'm at today. You know what I'm saying? Of course, I've made bad decisions and mistakes and all of that. I get that, but that it doesn't so much define us, but it does make us who we are. And so I wouldn't change anything that I went through. Even with me losing my leg, I knew that I had to have my leg removed to save my life. If I would have kept my ego, then I wouldn't even be here. I would be dead. You know what I'm saying? So I wouldn't change anything. I know that I constantly, try not to, or intentionally not to make the same mistakes that I made before, and that's always a work in progress. But overall, I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be who you are today.
No, I wouldn't. At all. So I'm grateful with the person that I am today, and I just tell people it's not about changing if you would change something in the past. It's the point is, did you hold yourself accountable for what you've done to yourself and to people or to a situation? That's where the growth is to me. Have you held yourself accountable? And I've learned to do that. When I make a mistake or a bad decision, I immediately hold myself accountable. And people value that and respect you more when you do that, because it's not selfish or you're not egotistical about it. So I make sure that I hold myself accountable.
That's so incredibly important because, there's so many people who don't want to take accountability, don't want to take a responsibility. Like, for example, if they're late for something, a model, a photographer, I'm sorry, I'm late. It was the bus's fault, or it was the train's fault, or it's like, no, you know what? I apologize. I'm late. Honestly, I should have woke up early. I honestly, I apologize, but I appreciate you staying here and waiting for me. That's
right.
Important. Take responsibility, and people will respect you so much.
Exactly. I agree. I definitely agree.
So you wear many, 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 many hats. What are 3 important things that you think it's important for everyone who's listening to this right now that they take away from this whole conversation?
3 things. self-respect, because you have to respect yourself more, because we tend to, and I've been guilty of it in the past. Oh, I want to be in a relationship with somebody again. Oh, I want this, I want that. But you can't ask for that if you don't love yourself, because we tend to use things like social media and people and money and materialistic things to make us whole. But if you don't like yourself, you cannot attract that into your life. So I would say self-respect is number one. The next thing would be, just have more faith in yourself. Like, just do things that you would have not normally done for yourself. Like, travel the world, start a business, just be you unapologetically. Stop allowing people to change who you are. Just have faith and believe that you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be debt-free. You deserve to be cancer-free if you're dealing with any ailments or disease-free. You deserve, abundance. You deserve to be happy. And you can only attract that in your life again if you have faith and you believe that you deserve that. And the last thing would be for me is don't overpromise. I tend to overpromise a lot of times, and then it puts me in these situations. It's okay to say no. And I saw a meme on social media recently, and it says no with a period at the end, and it said no is a complete sentence. If you don't feel it in your gut, it's okay to say no. You know what I'm saying? Because I'd rather say no and let someone deal with the fact of me saying no, not at this time, than me doing it and knowing that my heart is not completely in it. So I say don't feel bad about saying no, and just don't overpromise, and put that kind of burden on your life.
That's a good one. No, because I think a lot of people, we struggle. It's easy to say yes, but it's hard to say no. It's like, you have a friend or somebody's like, hey, can you do this? And you're like, I really don't want to do it, but you say yes. You don't say no, and because you say yes, then you feel like you're obligated. Okay, I have to do this, and then you feel bad, and then you kind of mean to that person, and it's really not their fault. It's your fault because you should have said no and just be completely honest with them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, there's so many times I should have said no, but yeah, I felt bad, and then I was angry at that person, and it was really my fault.
Exactly.
We learn as we get older.
That's true.
So, Jerris,
true.
How can people book you as a motivational speaker, or find Obvious Magazine and follow you on social media?
You can go to my website. It does have all of my information on there. I'm actually restructuring it, so it'll be back up soon, but there is something there. You go to jerrismadison.com. And you can follow me personally on Instagram at Jerris Mogul, JerrisMogul. And if you want to follow our magazine, you can go to obviousmag.com, obviousmag.com. And you can also follow us on all social media platforms at obviousmag, obviousmag.
Okay, good. And what's a few things that you like for anybody to take away from this episode of this?
I would say what you can take away from this episode is that, remember, there's always someone that's doing worse off than you. There's always someone doing worse off than you. I say breathe, look at your situation, and figure out how you can make it better. And purge, also known as remove, any and everything that is not allowing you to grow mentally, spiritually, physically, financially. If anything that you have in your life, or anybody, or any addiction or whatever you're dealing with is stopping those 4 key things, you need to let it go, because it's just going to create more anxiety in your life, and you deserve to be happy. So I want people to leave from here knowing that you can just take from this situation, my horrible situation, and understand that everything is going to be okay.
That's very, very powerful.
Thank you.
All right, Jerris. Well, thank you so very much. I really, really appreciate your time for being on the Power of Your Voice podcast, man. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to continuing following your journey.
Johnny here. Thank you for listening to the Power of Your Voice podcast. I'd love to get your feedback on this episode and how it impacted you. If someone in your life could benefit from this episode, share it with them. Check out thepowerofyourvoice.com to read show notes, leave a comment on the blog page, and to stay updated on all future episodes, subscribe to this podcast and leave a 5-star review. Thank you for your love and support.